Welcome friends. I'm sorry to see that we have only a few participants, but as I was saying to our friend, the speaker today, it seems to be Think Fest hangover. Regardless, we welcome our speaker today, who is part of our Guest in Town series, Professor Dibyesh Anand, who teaches at Westminster UK, London, and has held positions of Head of the Political Science and International Relations Department, and currently you are heading
School of
Social Sciences. So a bright star on Westminster's horizon. He's originally from India, I think settled in the UK for a long time, but his work basically is on the conflict-ridden area of South Asia and of course Tibet, which is an India-China issue as well. But today what we are going to hear from him is about Pakistan and India. And before he does that, I just want to quickly tell you what this center is all about, very, very quickly. When I left Daily Times in 2016, I decided to fill what I felt was the void in the Batak culture, which was such a major part of Lahore's life, by providing a space where people could gather and converse in freedom and without problems. Either I So we have provided that space, and that part of it is off and running. You know, we're having meetings, if not every week, every 10 days, 2 weeks. So obviously the need for such a space was there. That is what is being demonstrated. We're also setting up a reading library if somebody wants to actually do research in Pakistan, which is a threatened species. And we hope to put up an e-library also, because a lot of material is available online. We hope to set up a small mini TV station here and do vlogs, which I'm learning about, being a tech dinosaur. We also have a system for PowerPoint presentations, and we're going to use it on the 18th, on Friday this week, on the 64th death anniversary of Manto. We are going to show Nandita Das's banned film and have a discussion on it. And we've invited Manto's 3 daughters to be present with their children if they wish. So if you're free and if you're interested, please come along 5 o'clock on Friday the 18th. So without further ado, and just by the way, we are also contemplating going into book publishing, because publishing has become so commercial, the world over, Pakistan is no exception, that things that merit publication often don't find publishers because they don't think they can make enough money. So there has to be, I think, some residual institution or place where they can turn. And this is the word I put out amongst my friends. If you've got a manuscript, send it to me, I'll consider it. I've also come out with an online journal. It's called Pakistan Monthly Review. The January issue is out. Google it and have a look. And without wasting any further time, I'll invite Professor Dibyesh Anand to tell us about Pak-India, the dynamics of Pak-India relations, or whichever way you put it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me here. And I could start in various ways. I'm not going to give a long lectures because I want it to be conversation after a while. But of course, as lecturers and professors, we know, so I'm not going to speak for long, but then we'll end up speaking for 1 hour. But I won't do that. Right? Now, in terms of, I was thinking, someone asked me about the ski. Anyone have an idea what this symbolizes? This is about 1948 Nakba, Palestine. Right? So the idea is that a number of Palestinians fled their home, locked their door, and thought they'll come back. So they have the keys. They still have the keys. Right? So this is essentially to commemorate that and remember that this whole idea of returning back, and yet they have not returned back. And why do we talk of Palestine? What's the direct connection? I didn't wear it consciously to talk of this, because I wear it because people usually ask, and that allows me to talk of stateless nations, occupied people, to remind ourselves that formation of nation states are often bloody. Formation of nation states are often based on denial of nation to others. If you take example of Palestine and Palestine-Israel now, if you accept the two-state solution thing, right? You accept that, you realize that a new state is born, a new nation state is born, but in that process, and pre-existing people, identity gets crushed. First it gets divided, marginalized, and it gets crushed. Now, of course, in the context we are talking of, which is India-Pakistan, it's around the same time. It's around the same time, and there's the same actor involved in terms of the British there and British here. You have got something which they call British India, and then that gets transformed into India and Pakistan, East-West Pakistan, but India and Pakistan, right? So we're talking of post-colonial movement, which is again based on violence. The transition from colonial to post-colonial, transition from history to the present is very much based on violence, and we all know about it, right? Now, does that make India-Pakistan inevitably enemies? No, because there's no inevitability when it comes to love, hatred, whatever, right? So, I mean, those of us who have fallen in love with, I mean, individually, we know that we love, and we think, oh, this is the end of the world. You know, I'm much in love, and then you often fall out of love, and then you think, but how could I ever love this person? And then you fall in love with someone else. So this is a transition phase, right? In case of states, within international relations and politics, people talk of how the states think, how states have interests. What they often ignore is states are never constant. They evolve with time, they change with time, they transform with time. Those who control the state also change with time. So when in security studies, people talk of Pakistani thinking, Indian thinking, Chinese thinking, that's a very problematic way, because let's take an example, you can't have 1.2 billion people, their ideas, and say, oh, this is Indian thinking. There's no commonality between them, right? So if you ask a person in, let's say, the occupied part of occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they have different view of peace and justice. Then if you ask someone in Chhattisgarh, if you ask someone in Chennai, if you ask someone, a villager in Bengal, West Bengal, if you ask someone in Tripura, I mean, if you find something in common, you should be surprised, right? So I'm talking about, same as in this case. Now, the question for me, as someone who is a political scientist, though I don't like the word science, a political scientist, someone with politics background, is that why do states exist? So we had a discussion 2 days ago. I was talking to someone, as I was part of the panel. We had a discussion on India-Pakistan. It was, by the way, South Asian peace, not India-Pakistan peace. But typical to Indians and Pakistanis, we reduce it to India-Pakistan, as if no one else matters, right? And that's a kind of hegemonic identity we adopt. India is quite good at doing that, and Pakistanis seem to be no different. So they think it's all about them. And so it's not in Pakistan. But even there, when we talk of peace, assuming there's one state, things like this, one state, things like that, and what's the competition? They compete, they conflict, they cooperate. But the reality of the matter is, we don't ask the question, why does the state exist? For me, that's a fundamental question to ask. Why does the state exist? State exists for the people. If you accept broadly speaking, states exist for the people. People don't exist for the state. It is, however, the certain interpretation of ideology of nationalism which makes, or which allows for the notion that people exist for the, so why? This everyone say, oh, we are for the people, but people will have no voice, right? So there's certain notion of nationalism which encourages a way of thinking where people become secondary, so humans become secondary to the institution of the state, right? So then the idea is there's the state and they are the people, except we know that the people are of all kinds, and we also know that state is not a neutral institution. State is controlled by the people. State is controlled by the elite. Now, elites may change over time, but in this context, India-Pakistan context in particular, elite have been immensely successful in being slippery, chameleon-like, shifting ideologies, having families that would have left, center, right, religious, atheist, communist, anarchist also if they have to. No, the way in which families function, that even if ideology, the ruling idea starts shifting, at least the elite family will remain safe, right? So we find, and in case of India, I mean, if you take example, there's some study done of how Supreme Court functions. Supreme Court is still broadly secular institution in India, broadly secular, though it's under a lot of pressure. Most of the judges now, Supreme judges, are sons of other judges in the past, right? So around, they said, 90 to 100 legal families control all the Supreme Court and High Court, right? Now this is India, which supposedly had land reform, supposedly had better reform than even Pakistan, right? I mean, Pakistan, I will not, I mean, you know more than I would, that how the elites control things here. And that's supposed to be have longer, more stronger democracy in Indian context, right? Even there, so we are talking the courts, right? Economy is something similar. You may have new people emerging, but broadly speaking, you have got families involved here. Now, politics in Indian context is slightly different than here, it seems. What you have is, of course, not a Gandhi family dominance, of course, we know is highly threatened, it's not there that much. Modi, with all the problems, and he's a fascist, and I am very clear he's a fascist, okay, he's a semi-fascist, proto-fascist, but he's fascist, right? That's his ideology, right? Then, but he doesn't belong to any particular family, and RSS doesn't encourage that kind of family Raj, right? So it's not an elite family, it's a different kind of danger, right? But the key reason why India doesn't have family dominance of this kind all the time, though its family is very much dominant still is, the elite family is because of the caste politics. Now, in India, if you may have heard of the reservation affirmative action. So, Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi, they get affirmative action. Now, they get affirmative action and they need affirmative action because there have been social and historical injustices. And the Savarna, the upper caste, the 15 to 20% people who dominate India can't stomach that. So, therefore, through various means, it could be through right, it could be through center, sometimes it could be through left also, because Communist Party in India is most Brahminical in terms of its social composition, right? So you have got RSS, which is Brahminical, you have got Communist Party that's Brahminical, and Congress also, which is rather Brahminical, though it can also show other forms, right? So you have got certain kind of consensus where, of course, for political reasons, because it's a proper elections take place, right? Unlike in some other countries in the neighborhood, proper election take place, they have to respect and they have to speak the language of Dalit Bahujan and Adivasi, because they need the vote, they're the majority. But they will try their level best to marginalize them. So there's a struggle going on in India. So still it has not reached the fascist stage. The reason India has not moved into a stage of authoritarianism, the reason India is still not, people have not given up on democracy, because democratic, it's not the institutions that are that strong, by the way. It's not the Supreme Court that's that strong, though still it's okay. It's not even the military, which is, well, it has Hindu ethos broadly speaking, but it is secular in composition at least, right? It's not that they are defending secularism. Largely, plurality is defended by the fact that society is extremely plural, and because of elections, all political parties have to rely upon that immense majority, right? That's what's happening. The reason I talk of this, I'm not talking India, Pakistan here, to just remind ourselves we're talking about different kinds of societies, a lot of commonalities, but some differences. So the key difference I see vis-a-vis Pakistan is the mass mobilization of the poor and the marginalized, which is not taking place necessarily on class lines, those is there, but often taking on caste lines. Because caste discourse is accepted and acceptable and politically, let's say, relevant. In case of Pakistan, you know better, I just can observe. What I notice is when in hotel or elsewhere, people who clean, people who this, I talk to them and I can guess their religion and I can guess the caste, right? Of course, but the caste discourse is not there. Normally, in India also you have the same, it's the Dalits would be the manual scavengers, Dalits would be the cleaners, Dalits would be this. So while economically, socially they will be marginal, but politically they will be more powerful. In this context, my guess is because caste is not officially recognized, if there's no affirmative action based on caste, it's very difficult to challenge that. Because if you think, oh, it doesn't exist because we are good, whatever, a religion which has no caste, then you can't challenge it. Sometimes recognition matters, right? Now, so what we have in both countries broadly is still elitism functioning in different ways. Different context, elitism very much part and parcel of it. Right? So when we talk of peace between two states, it's very important to talk of peace not in terms of India, Pakistan as such, but kind of peace which would reduce violence, reduce threat of war, but essentially democratize both states. Because peace between two states could also imply, okay, you exploit yours more easily, right? And rather than concentrate on fighting against each other, you fight against your own people and suppress them. That also takes place. Take example China. China invests more heavily in internal security than external security. And that investment is very heavy. That's because the primary challenge to China comes not from the US or the West, because West is complicit with China's mix of authoritarianism and capitalism. The threat comes from essentially the population within, because population within can be kept quiet on the grounds that there is economic development taking place. If economic development slows down, then there will be a major crisis. They need that level of military investment and internally to suppress population, because of course it's a people's republic of China where people have no right, because they can't even change the government if they wanted to. Now in this case, India and Pakistan. So the title I've given is moving beyond politics of enmity. The reason it's like me preaching to the converted kind of thing is, the reason there's enmity is because people benefit from it. We often come across when we talk about India, Pakistan, peace, people saying, no, peace will come, just wait for the right leader. There's often fantasy for the strong leader, or a military dictator there. If Modi is a strong leader because he's a fascist leader, so they will bring peace. The reality of the matter, or at least my reading is, it's not the individuals who matter. Ultimately, it's the institutions that matter, systems that matter. Even Nehru, who was quite powerful leader in India, democratically elected, and he had that charisma and everything. When it came to dealing with China in 1959-62 period, that period, right? His hands, over time, because of he had major flaws, his hands were tied because of media, but media at that time was not this kind of private media. And yet his hands were tied. So what I'm trying to have is the institutions in place, the systems in place that often prevent peace from happening. So you may have individual leaders who can try to bring about some peace, right? So the whole Musharraf formula thing, it may have happened, it may not have happened, it could have been signed, but would it have been implemented? We don't even know what would have happened, right? The reality of the matter is Kashmir, and there were Kashmiri leaders who rejected it. The key Kashmiri leader rejected that formula. And now he is the most popular Kashmiri leader, whether we like him or not. I may dislike him. I have called him, I have said to him that, your ideology, which is a certain kind of Jamaat-e-Islami, it's very similar to RSS, which is my religion is the best one, and of course the others don't matter. We will protect the minority, but minority will have no rights as equals, right? And of course, it didn't go down well, but we have to understand that Jamaat-e-Islami, however, in Kashmir is very different from Jamaat-e-Islami in India, which will be different from here. There, at least with all the problems, they may have certain kind of Muslim chauvinism, but they are resistant. Right? So there is a different thing. However, Kashmir issue is a crucial thing. To move beyond politics of enmity, we would need a proper solution to Kashmir, and that's my main work, by the way. I'm not an India-Pakistan person as such. I'm more of a Kashmir person. I'm not Kashmiri. I'm Kashmir person because my interest is in stateless nations, colonized people, and I see Kashmir as a colonized space by both the states, by the way, right? India more brutal, Pakistan not brutal, but in its own way equally problematic. So it's about Kashmir. So it has to, then I'll expand that later. It is about democratizing the state. I say democratizing because if you have unelected institutions, which become custodians of the nation, it's always a recipe for violence. It's a recipe for taking away rights. It's a recipe for selective peace and selective war, right? And I know it could be more controversial here, but I've had that problem in India also. And I always like to remind even the military people. I remember giving a talk at IDSA, which is Institute of Defense Studies Analysis in Delhi, right? You can imagine some of them didn't like it. I look at if you look at Indian military, so Modi, when he brings policy, they said, demonetization, they brought in demonetization. They said, why are you opposing it? Look at Jawans on the border, they're dying and you are afraid of standing in the queue, right? The point is there's no connection between people dying while standing in the queue, mostly poor people, not the rich, and the soldiers. There's a commonality, however. Both of them are poor. Exactly. Even the soldiers are poor there, right? So we have to remember that. But then the Jawan. So Jawan are those, Jawan is always an odd term, but anyway, Jawan are those you can never criticize. You can criticize even the military, but no, military is something you should never criticize. You have to always start. If you, even good liberals have good liberals to start by saying, no, military is right. Military soldiers at least are right? Those kind of things. Now in that context, and in this context both, the legacy of the British Indian army, right? These custodian of Indian nation, that's how it's presented. And of course, Pakistani army is custodian of Indian nation. What's the origin of that army? It's British Indian army. What was the British Indian army? It was a sepoy army. Sepoy army was essentially a tool of colonial power. So the origin of the custodian of the two post-colonial nations essentially is colonial. It was meant to suppress your own people to support the rulers. It was meant to fight wars overseas for your colonial, right? And that study of the militaries have to be done in a way to remind the wider public that it is an institution, might be a necessary institution. If you believe in state, then it's a necessary institution, right? If you believe in that, fine. But at least you have to acknowledge the origins of it. And how come the institution that worked for the colonial power to suppress its own population then hijacks the nationalist narrative when they become the custodian nation, right? So this is where that, I guess that's a moment where democratization gets sidelined, marginalized, occupied, even the concept by the unelected institution, right? So when we talk India-Pakistan relation beyond politics, and we have to acknowledge that a peace between two, how to say, militarized nation states, right? Peace between that would be the peace of the powerful, which would imply anti-democratic peace based on suppression of the own population, which anyway carry on, even without peace, right? Second, so politics requires clear solution to the Kashmir issue, right? Third, so the first would be democratization, third would be the Kashmir issue. And regarding Kashmir issue, of course, it's a movement of self-determination, it's human rights, both languages are used. Some of my Kashmiri friends say, but it's not human rights, it's self-determination, others say self-determination, not human rights. They are linked. The reason why there's so much of denial of human rights is because there's denial of self-determination, and the other way around, right? So, and the fact that there's so much denial of human rights implies urgent that we resolve the self-determination issue. Now, the UN resolution, India is very clear, there's no problem in Kashmir, right? And when the international community says, but do something, they say, but it's a bilateral thing. It's between me and us and Pakistan. But then they'll not talk with Pakistan, right? It's an odd thing of no problem, bilateral problem, but certainly not international problem. Now Pakistan on that looks better because they say it's a self-determination problem, right? And Pakistani state and would always have self-determination. But self-determination essentially implies the right of the people of that erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir to decide for themselves whether they want to be part of the state or be something else. That's a basic right of self-determination. Yet, Pakistani support of self-determination is very much about UN resolution. And UN resolution is very clear, India or Pakistan. No independence, which is denial of self-determination, right? So, now, the reason I highlight that is because it's important to remember that where Pakistan comes across as better, right? Of course, it's better. It's not violent the way Indian state is violent. So I'm not trying to equate both of them in terms of the level of violence, the kind of killing. 80 to 100,000 Kashmiris have been killed, kind of killing, kind of torture, kind of everyday indignity, kind of everyday humiliation, 8 to 10,000 people being forcibly disappeared, cases of mass rape in Kashmir, cases of sexual torture that would not be documented, case of arbitrary killing, pellet blinding, all of this, right? So again, in this context, I don't need to explain, you would be aware of it, right? That's it. So Pakistan doesn't do all of that in its controlled Kashmir, all of that, right? However, when you take a look at the nature of the state in both contexts, India and Pakistan, the state taking the right to disappear people, state having the right, it's not an official right, of course, that will pass, right to disappear, right to torture, use sexual violence, threat of sexual violence, use of torture, use of threat of torture, we find that both states use it, right? So even here you have got cases of disappearance, if not in AJK, you'd have it in other parts of the country, they're there. So in that sense, fundamentally both states are similar, right? But in Kashmir context, the Pakistani state's idea is self-determination. Some leaders have also said that, okay, we should also have independence option, you would not have a problem with it. If that is the case, one thing that Pakistan can really do, and that would change the rule of the game, that would make Pakistan's reputation go up, that would really put India in crisis with Kashmir. And that is, they could get AJK constitution changed, because AJK constitution is very clear that it is accession to Pakistan, right? So if you're fighting election there, you have to work towards accession to Pakistan. So if you're JK, you're fighting for independence, then you can't fight elections, right? So that they can change. They can say that you have the freedom to choose. You can choose Pakistan or you can choose independence. I can understand that they can't say you can choose India in that context. I understand that. So they could get the constitution changed to include the independence option. Some would say, but it's an autonomous whatever region, so we can't do it. But we all know how much autonomy the AJK also have, right? Second thing that would be required, and that is connected to wider problem in Pakistan. The AJK constitutional notice says the president, prime minister, and I think many of them have to be Muslim. Right? Now, the state of Jammu and Kashmir overall would have around 30 to 35% non-Muslim. That includes majority Hindus in Jammu now. That includes half of the population of Ladakh. It's not big, but it's significant. The Buddhists, right? It includes Kashmiri Pandits, most of them who fled, who had to flee the valley in 90s, but they are still part of Jammu and Kashmir, right? Because if that is not changed, then the message that goes out is, yes, we want Jammu and Kashmir to be part of Pakistan, but 30% of people would be permanent minority, which was fear of Jinnah vis-a-vis the border India, and therefore the argument for Pakistan was that Muslims would be permanent minority, repressed, marginalized in India, and therefore Pakistan, right? So if we take that vision of Jinnah, then we have to also acknowledge that in this case Pakistan would have to not reduce non-Muslims in Jammu and Kashmir to be permanent minority. But can AJK have a constitution that says is broadly secular, because then it becomes secular? But then that connects to Pakistan's constitution. So there's a fundamental problem here. The reason I highlight this is because a lot of time people don't pay attention to these things, and then they don't recognize that while talking self-determination, Pakistan has put itself in a position, consciously, unconsciously, where practically speaking, it is very difficult for it to have any claims over entire Jammu and Kashmir, right? So that's what I meant by this, right? Now, India technically, I always say it's a sly Brahmanical republic. They've been clever. They've kept the secular thing. So the idea, even if they're Muslims, fine, we can manage it. That's what they have done, right? So Kashmir resolution, for me personally, of course, ultimately the right of people of Jammu and Kashmir, all people, right? Not only Kashmiri Muslims of the valley, but all people, is their right. So they decide. They can decide overall Pakistan. They can decide overall India. They can decide independence. That should be there. In my reading, or in my view, a good solution, which would work for all three parties concerned, India, Pakistan and Jammu and Kashmir, would be an independent, secular Jammu and Kashmir with significant autonomy for all parts of Jammu and Kashmir. Significant, really significant, genuine autonomy. The reason I mentioned that is, that independent secular Jammu, why independent? Okay, why secular? Because of the multi-ethnic, multi-religious context, right? Practically speaking, that's the only solution that's possible. Otherwise, it becomes majoritarian. Why independent? Because if become part of one or the other, then the minorities would have a problem. There's a section of the population would have a problem. But it also needs to be neutral between India and Pakistan. Because if it's neutral and friendly with India and Pakistan, then Jammu and Kashmir benefits immensely, and both India and Pakistan benefit, right? So for me, it's a win-win solution. I know it's an idealistic solution, but the win-win solution for all concerned would be an independent, secular Jammu and Kashmir. Then India benefits from it, Pakistan benefits from it, then you don't need that big military, they don't need that big military, you don't need RSS to constantly say we are in danger, and the Muslims are going to come and do things to our people, right? And so there will be more progressive, democratic politics in both parts, more investment in human rights and everything will be there, and people of Jammu and Kashmir will benefit from it. So it makes sense economically, it makes sense ethically, it makes sense morally, it makes sense politically also. The challenge to that, of course, will be China. Because China in the 90s have made it very clear they don't want any new state in the region. Because a new Jammu Kashmir would be encouragement for Xinjiang, Japan. Right? But leave that aside. That's a challenge. But I mean, it's an idealistic solution. But as a scholar, and this is as a scholar, for me, and when you look at it, and I look at, no empires stay forever. No states live forever. Boundaries change, things come and go, right? So 50, 100, 200 years later, who knows that's possible, right? That's a solution that would work for all in mind, right? Now, regarding the second part, so that is then connected to democratization in both places, genuine democratization where we recognize that both states are neoliberal. I mean, in that sense, Imran Khan and Modi are not that different. You know, Imran Khan, when he went to Turkey recently, and he said, "Oh, socialism has dominated Pakistan for so long. This is why economy is back." He said, "When did socialism come here?" Bhutto was sorry, I know Bhutto was socialist. Then, well, gosh, no doubt socialism was in crisis, right? Right. So all kinds of things. When was socialism real in that sense, right? Of course, there have been socialist movements here. There have been social movement there. So, like in Congress in India also had socialist party, communist part, the right-wing part, extreme right-wing part, the centrist part, and the opportunist part. Same would be with political parties here. So there have been struggles within the political parties, but it was not a proper socialism that was being practiced. If anything, in this case, what was being practiced was a certain form of militarism, militarist nationalism, militarism hiding itself as national. Militarism is largely about military, but nationalism is the mask through which military gets legitimacy. In that case, in Indian context, things were slightly different, but not that different. It was caste dominance, but using the language of democracy, right? So in both the contexts, democratization would imply challenging the elite, challenging institutions that support the elite, and I know that's a radical proposition, you know. I could be seen as part of elite, but it's challenging. But you have to challenge the elite, political elite, economic elite, social elite. It is about challenging institutions. It is about reforming institutions, right? So I may have an anarchist position, what I consider the queer anarchist position, but they might not be seen as feasible. So even within the structure, it's still feasible to push the state into more democratic direction, where we recognize again and we remind ourselves that this, what I said, how I started, that states exist for us. States are meant to be, serve us. We are not meant to serve the state, right? And therefore, we have to then start questioning forms of ideology that are used against people, against individual human beings, to dehumanize others. So in India, they say, oh, you know, Muslims are threat, Muslims are danger, Christians are threat, secularists are threat, communists are threat, good nationalists are the Hindu nationalists who, you know, should they drink cow piss or whatever, do that and don't eat beef and kill anyone who is going to eat beef, right? That's how it is. Or in this case, you know, good Muslims are those, or good nationalists are those, or good nationalists are good Muslims, and good Muslims are those who, of course, will kill minority or kill others who are committing blasphemy or whatever. So those kind of things are all linked. And so I'm not very coherent here, but I guess you're getting the point I'm trying to make. Is that what we need? Kashmir is one, but Kashmir is not the only solution. Because Kashmir issue, even if it's resolved in the manner I suggested, there would be fundamental problem in these two states. Because even Kashmir can become that elitist and everything the way these two states are. That it becomes like India, Pakistan became what British were. Kashmir can become what the Indian Pakistanis are, right? So the idea is how to transform the state, right? There are different tools, there are different movements taking place, and therefore ultimately that we do need to support, have solidarity, we speak about, write about, encourage, generate new kinds of movements that talk of human rights, that talk of self-determination, that talk of ultimately, and that's a simple thing, challenging dehumanization. Because fundamental and common across both states is that level of dehumanization, right? That is a way where your life gets less value than my life. So you get disappeared, you can get killed, I will not get killed, I will not get disappeared because I belong to certain identity, I belong to certain class, I belong to certain ethnicity, I belong to certain religion. So until unless we challenge that differential value of life, there is no possibility of moving beyond enmity, which would work for all people in India and Pakistan. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I know I speak deep, but I know. So we can have a long chat.
One sec. Professor Anand, thank you very much. Enlightening and provocative. And that is what we had hoped for. The solution you present, in your own words, you describe it as perhaps idealist, and there are formidable obstacles in the path of such a resolution. And what occurred to me was a chance phrase that you used, which was implications for India and Pakistan themselves. They would have to undergo a very radical change, as you say, challenge the structures, the power structures that exist, whether they are caste, whether they are religion, whether they are whatever, and a real transformation before such a solution might prove feasible, acceptable to all sides. So that was an interesting idea, but I fear that it may or may not be practicable. We are not sure. You know, given the track record of Pak-India relations, there's always room for pessimism. Sorry to say. The other thing you mentioned, which I thought was very interesting, you talked about dynasties, whether it is control of state institutions or political parties. We are very familiar with that here. Our political parties tend to be dynastical. We haven't broken out of the South Asian mold in that respect. And also some institutions talked about 90, 100 legal families dominating the higher judiciary. Well, maybe it's not 90, 100 families here, but certainly there is a nexus. And we know how these things work. You have to, as Javed would know, suck up to the existing judiciary in order to be allowed in, if you know what I mean. I think when you mention that Indian politics, actually the essence revolves around caste rather than class or other issues. Yes, I agree by and large that is true, and you pose the conflict with the Brahmanical elite, which emerges whenever some affirmative action is taken on behalf of the oppressed classes or castes. But we've seen recently huge protests by the farmers and the largest strike by the working class in living memory or history by the Indian working class. So although caste probably does dominate, I think it is challenged by these kind of movements from below. I think probably a more realistic resolution of what is often referred to as the core issue between Pakistan, India and Kashmir is that if territory cannot change hands and borders cannot change, at least let the status quo be managed in a way that there is an internal settlement of the Indian state with the Kashmiri people. And Musharraf went so far, ironically, the architect of Kargil, went so far as to say whatever is acceptable to the Kashmiris is acceptable to Pakistan. Very close to a resolution, but didn't happen. So I think something like an internal settlement with the Kashmiris on the part of the Indian state, not the repression that you referred to. And on Pakistan's part, a perhaps recognition, a realistic recognition that Indian Kashmir is likely to remain Indian and Pakistani Kashmir is likely to remain Pakistani, and we need to manage this divided territory in a way that prevents war and promotes peace and normalization of relations, because my reading of the subcontinent's history is that if you're not careful, the pattern is always centrifugal forces are more powerful in our history than centripetal. Only in 3 periods have we had relatively unified states, otherwise always been principalities battling each other, which is why invaders had such an easy time conquering India, because they used these internal divisions, as we know. But I won't go on, I won't take too much advantage of the chair. Yes?
Can I just respond to this before?
Yeah.
Not respond, not reflect on this. So you're right, I mean, as you could see, I had not planned my talks. I was thinking aloud when I was speaking to you. So broadly speaking, I said Kashmir and then the democratization of the 2 states. And this is why, of course, genuine problem or the real solution or the solution I'm offering for Jammu Kashmir problem will not take place unless the 2 states are democratized and therefore have confidence to do it. And unless that resolves the Jammu Kashmir conflict, this will not happen. So both are connected, right? And I understand. But
chicken and egg,
But as I said, as scholars, our role is also to think what is idealist, because at one time what is idealist becomes practical later. So that's why I was proposing that idea. There was caste and caste, you're right, there have been large-scale protests in India, but most of these protests, my friends have been part of organizing it and everything. Most of the people who are protesting, you can, without even knowing who they are, you can guess who they are. They belong to Dalit Bahujan caste. Most of them. Almost all of them. Very, very few would be upper caste, right?
There's an intersection of caste.
Yeah, caste. The problem in Indian context was that a lot of Ambedkarites are those Dalits and Bahujan people who reject right wing who reject Congress, who reject left also. In fact, often and sometimes I would get disturbed in the past. I identify as left. I would get disturbed because the attack on left was also as strong as attack on the right. Yeah? On the ground that left had exploited is in Bengal and Kerala and the Brahminical, and they use the language of class in order to dominate this kind of thing, right? The leaders would be upper caste, and therefore Ambedkar used the language increasing of the Constitution of India, which is architect was Dr. Ambedkar himself, to therefore talk of caste mobilization. So they have been more active in these things along with the left. So the way I would say, left is in serious crisis in India, the organized left.
I've got news for you.
Yeah.
It's in crisis everywhere.
Yeah, I know, but it has always been in crisis. But maybe right will be in crisis when it disappears. Now, so these protests, right? Most of them, there's no one single party organizing it. So the way I see it, in one sense, what has happened with Modi is combination of the violence of nationalism, violence of economy, violence of neoliberal policy. What he has done is actually has brought, in a way, encouraged farmers, workers, others left, and the Ambedkar protesters, women, queer rights activists somewhere, right? Not in
And
this
now
context,
some regional parties.
Regional parties. So in a way, he, by concentrating power in him and authority in him, it has become natural for others to mobilize. So that's what is happening. So I'm not saying that caste is the right way forward and class not class, but it's going to be a mix of both, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking at your